The story of Deborah, the only female judge of Israel, is a fascinating account of courage, faith, and leadership during turbulent times. In a male-dominated world, Deborah stood out not only as a political leader, but also as a prophetess respected by all the people. Her story challenges us to rethink our prejudices about leadership and shows how God can use anyone, regardless of gender or social status, to accomplish his purposes. Let's dive into this exciting narrative and discover how an extraordinary woman helped change the course of Israel's history. After the death of Joshua, Israel entered a tumultuous period known as the Era of the Judges. This was a time of great political and spiritual instability for God's people. The absence of strong central leadership led to a state of moral and social anarchy. The book of Judges summarizes this chaotic situation well. In chapter 21, verse 25, we read, "In those days Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit." During this time, Israel fell into a repetitive cycle of apostasy, oppression, and deliverance. The people would turn away from God, worship the idols of neighboring nations, and as a result, suffer at the hands of their enemies. In their suffering, they would cry out to God, who would then raise up a judge to deliver them. This pattern was not just a historical coincidence, but a direct reflection of the covenant relationship between God and Israel. The book of Judges clearly describes this cycle. In chapter 2, verses 14 to 16, we find a concise explanation of this pattern. In his anger against Israel, the Lord gave them into the hands of raiders who plundered them. He sold them to their enemies all around, whom they were no longer able to resist. Whenever Israel went out to fight, the hand of the Lord was against them to defeat them, just as he had sworn to them. They were in great distress. Then the Lord raised up judges who saved them out of the hands of these raiders. This cycle was not just a series of historical events, but a powerful testimony to God's faithfulness, even in the face of his people's unfaithfulness. Every time Israel turned away, God allowed them to suffer the consequences of their choices. Yet, he never abandoned them completely. When they cried out for help, God, in his mercy, always responded. It was in this context of apostasy and oppression that one of the most severe trials faced by Israel arose. The book of Judges provides details about this critical situation. In chapter 4, verses 1 to 3, we read, "Again the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, now that Ehud was dead. So the Lord sold them into the hands of Jabin king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. Sisera, the commander of his army, was based in Harosheth Hagoyim. Because he had 900 chariots fitted with iron and had cruelly oppressed the Israelites for 20 years, they cried to the Lord for help. Jabin, the king of Canaan, and his powerful general Sisera imposed a brutal regime over Israel. With a superior military force, including 900 iron chariots, they dominated God's people for 2 decades. This was not a light or temporary oppression. For 20 long years, the Israelites lived under the heavy yoke of the Canaanites. The iron chariots mentioned in the text were an advanced military technology for the time. They represented a significant advantage on the battlefield, especially against Israel's infantry forces. This technological superiority, combined with Sisera's strategic leadership, made the Canaanite army practically invincible from a human perspective. The Israelites lived in constant fear, suffering abuse and exploitation at the hands of their oppressors. The oppression was not only military, but also economic and social. God's people likely faced heavy taxes, restrictions on their freedom of movement and worship, and perhaps even forced labor. The situation seemed hopeless, and many must have wondered if God had forgotten them. It was at this critical moment, when hope seemed to be fading, that God, faithful to his promise, raised up Deborah as a judge and prophetess in Israel. The biblical text presents her in a unique and powerful way. In Judges chapter 4, verses 4 and 5, we read, "Now Deborah, a prophet, the wife of Lapidoth, was leading Israel at that time. She held court under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went up to her to have their disputes decided. Deborah was an unprecedented figure in Israel's history. As a prophetess, she received messages directly from God and delivered them to the people. This spiritual role was crucial in a time when the nation had strayed so far from the ways of the Lord. Through Deborah, God was re-establishing a direct line of communication with his people, calling them back to the covenant they had neglected. As a judge, Deborah resolved disputes and made important decisions for the nation. This role combined legal, administrative, and often military aspects. The judges were more than mere arbitrators. They were leaders whom God raised to guide and deliver his people. The fact that Deborah was a woman in such a position of authority was extraordinary for the time, demonstrating that God can use anyone he chooses to lead his people. The palm of Deborah, mentioned in the biblical text, became an important place of judgment and counsel. This palm tree, situated between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, was more than just a geographical point. It became a symbol of justice and the presence of God among the people. People came from all over Israel to seek Deborah's wisdom and guidance. Sitting under the palm tree, Deborah listened to the people's concerns and, guided by God, offered wise and just solutions. This scene reminds us of the importance of leaders being accessible. Deborah wasn't isolated in a palace or temple. She was available to the people, ready to hear their concerns and provide divine guidance. The respect and trust that the people had for Deborah were evident. In a patriarchal society where women rarely held public leadership positions, Deborah was recognized and respected by all of Israel. Her authority came not only from her position as a judge, but also from her integrity and her close relationship with God. Deborah's rise as a leader of Israel marked a turning point in the nation's history. After 20 years of oppression, the people finally had a leader who could guide them back to God and to freedom. Her presence was a constant reminder that God had not abandoned his people, even in the darkest times. With Deborah firmly established as the judge and prophetess of Israel, the stage was set for a dramatic shift in events. The people had cried out to God for deliverance, and now, through Deborah, the Lord was about to respond. The book of Judges tells us how God initiated this process of liberation. In chapter 4, verse 6, we read, "She sent for Barak son of Abinoam from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, 'The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go, take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun, and lead them up to Mount Tabor.'" This divine call, relayed through Deborah, marked the beginning of a new phase in Israel's history. God not only chose Deborah to lead, but also selected Barak as the military commander who would lead Israel into battle against their oppressors. Barak's selection was no accident. He was from Kadesh in the region of Naphtali, one of the areas most affected by Canaanite oppression. This meant Barak had a personal stake in the liberation of his people. Furthermore, as a native of the region, he likely knew the terrain well, which would be a strategic advantage in the coming battle. The divine plan, as revealed to Deborah, was clear and specific. Barak was to gather 10,000 men from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun. These two neighboring tribes were located in northern Israel, close to Mount Tabor, which would be the meeting point for the army. The choice of Mount Tabor as the gathering place was no coincidence. Located at the border of the lands of Naphtali, Zebulun, and Issachar, Mount Tabor was a strategic choice. Its height, around 588 meters above sea level, provided a panoramic view of the surrounding region, including the Jezreel Valley, where the battle would likely take place. Deborah continued to relay God's message to Barak. In verse 7 of the same chapter she says, "I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River, and give him into your hands." This part of the divine message is particularly interesting. God not only promised victory but also revealed part of his strategy. The plan was to lure Sisera and his army to the Kishon River. This river, which was usually just a small stream, could become a dangerous torrent during rains. As we will see later, this played a crucial role in the battle. God's promise to deliver Sisera into Barak's hands was a guarantee of victory. However, this promise required faith and action on Barak's part. He would need to trust in God's word as delivered by Deborah and act on that trust by gathering the army and preparing for battle. Barak's response to this divine call reveals much about his character and the nature of faith. In verse 8 we read Barak's reply. Barak said to her, "If you go with me, I will go, but if you don't go with me, I won't go." At first glance, Barak's response might seem like a lack of faith. After all, he had just received a direct promise of victory from God. Why would he hesitate to go alone? However, a deeper analysis reveals a more nuanced understanding of the situation. Barak recognized the importance of Deborah's presence. As a prophetess, she represented God's presence and guidance for the people. Having Deborah by his side in battle would serve as a constant reminder to the entire army that God was with them. Additionally, at a time when spiritual leadership was as crucial as military leadership, Deborah's presence could inspire confidence and courage in the troops. Deborah's response to this request is equally revealing. In verse 9 she says, "Certainly I will go with you," said Deborah, "but because of the course you are taking, the honor will not be yours, for the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." Deborah agreed to accompany Barak, demonstrating her commitment to Israel's cause and her willingness to lead not just from a distance, but from the front lines. However, she also delivered a prophecy. The glory of victory would not belong to Barak, but to a woman. This prophecy is remarkable for several reasons. First, it challenges the cultural expectations of the time, where military glory was typically reserved for men. Second, it adds an element of suspense to the narrative. Who would this woman be? As we will later see, the answer to this question will be surprising. With the agreement between Deborah and Barak in place, preparations for battle began. Verse 10 tells us, "There Barak summoned Zebulun and Naphtali, and 10,000 men went up under his command. Deborah also went up with him." The task of assembling the army would not have been easy. After 20 years of oppression, many Israelites were likely demoralized and fearful. Gathering 10,000 men willing to face the powerful Canaanite army with its fearsome iron chariots required a great deal of courage and faith. The battle against the Canaanites was a pivotal moment in the history of Israel, marking the end of 20 years of oppression under the rule of King Jabin of Canaan. The confrontation between the Israelite forces led by Deborah and Barak and the powerful Canaanite army commanded by Sisera was about to begin. The book of Judges provides a detailed narrative of these crucial events. In chapter 4, verse 12, we read, "When they told Sisera that Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor, this news of the Israelite mobilization took the Canaanite general by surprise, as he believed he had full control over the region. Sisera's reaction was swift and decisive. Verse 13 reports, "Sisera gathered together his 900 iron chariots and all his men from Harosheth Hagoyim to the Kishon River." This massive mobilization demonstrated how seriously Sisera regarded the Israelite threat. He was determined to crush the rebellion with the full might of his army. The 900 iron chariots were the pride of the Canaanite army and their primary tactical advantage. These war vehicles, advanced for the time, were feared for their speed, impact force, and ability to break infantry formations. For the Israelites, who fought primarily on foot, the prospect of facing these chariots must have been terrifying. The crucial moment of the battle is described in verse 14. "Then Deborah said to Barak, 'Go. This is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you?' So Barak went down Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. This command from Deborah to attack was not just a military order, but a declaration of faith. She was reiterating God's promise and instilling courage in the Israelite troops. The phrase, "Has not the Lord gone ahead of you?" reminded the Israelites that they were not fighting alone, but that God himself was leading the battle. Barak's descent from Mount Tabor, followed by 10,000 men, must have been an impressive sight. The Israelite army, who had lived under oppression for so long, now marched boldly to face their oppressors. Meanwhile, the Canaanite army advanced confidently. With their 900 iron chariots and well-equipped troops, Sisera likely expected a swift and decisive victory. The valley below Mount Tabor seemed like the perfect battlefield to deploy the full power of his war chariots. However, what happened next caught everyone by surprise. Verse 15 describes, "At Barak's advance, the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and army by the sword." This statement attributes the victory directly to God, indicating that something extraordinary occurred on the battlefield. The narrative suggests that there was divine intervention that caused confusion in Sisera's army. Although the exact details are not provided, it's clear that something unexpected happened to level the playing field and give the Israelites an advantage over the technologically superior Canaanites. Many scholars believe that natural conditions played a crucial role in this battle. There are indications that a sudden storm may have occurred, turning the terrain in their favor. The Kishon River, normally a quiet stream, could have become a dangerous torrent with the sudden rain. If this was the case, the impact on the battle would have been dramatic. A heavy downpour would have turned the valley's soil into mud, making the iron chariots more of a hindrance than an advantage. The horses would have struggled to pull the heavy chariots through the muddy terrain, making them easy targets for the Israelite foot soldiers. Additionally, if the Kishon River indeed overflowed, many Canaanite soldiers, possibly those in the stuck chariots, might have been swept away by the rising waters. The Israelite soldiers, on the other hand, lighter and more familiar with the terrain, would have had a significant advantage under these conditions. The scene on the battlefield must have been chaotic. Imagine the Canaanite army, confident in their technological superiority, suddenly finding themselves powerless against the forces of nature. The iron chariots, their greatest pride, now became death traps, bogged down in the mud or being swept away by the floodwaters. Panic likely spread quickly through the Canaanite ranks. Seeing their chariots disabled and their comrades defeated or dragged away by the river, many soldiers probably tried to flee. The confusion in Sisera's army, mentioned in the biblical text, may have resulted from this combination of unexpected events and adverse natural conditions. Meanwhile, the Israelite army, encouraged by the obvious divine intervention, must have attacked with renewed vigor. Verse 16 tells us, "Barak pursued the chariots and army as far as Harosheth Hagoyim, and all Sisera's troops fell by the sword. Not a man was left." This relentless pursuit ensured that Israel's victory was complete. It wasn't enough just to defeat the Canaanite army on the battlefield. To secure Israel's freedom, the enemy's military capacity had to be completely destroyed. The phrase, "not a man was left," is particularly significant. It indicates that Israel's victory was absolute and complete. The once powerful Canaanite army, with its feared iron chariots, was utterly annihilated. This victory marked the end of Canaanite oppression over Israel. Verse 23 concludes the account of the battle. On that day, God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan, before the Israelites. This final statement emphasizes once again that the victory came from God, not just from human strength or strategy. The battle against the Canaanites was more than just a military conflict. It was a decisive moment in Israel's history, a turning point that marked the end of 20 years of oppression. It was also a powerful demonstration of God's power and faithfulness. For the Israelites, this victory must have been a transformative experience, After decades of fear and submission, they found themselves triumphant over their oppressors. The confidence and courage they gained on this day would have a lasting impact, not only on their individual lives, but on the nation as a whole. After the devastating defeat of his army, Sisera, the once feared general of the Canaanites, found himself in a desperate situation. The man who had led 900 iron chariots against Israel was now fleeing alone, on foot, seeking to escape the relentless pursuit of Barak and his forces. In his frantic escape, Sisera strayed far from the battlefield, leaving behind the chaos and destruction. He was running for his life, knowing that being captured would mean certain death. As he fled, Sisera must have reflected on the dramatic turn of events. Just hours earlier, he was confident of his imminent victory over the rebellious Israelites. Now, he was a fugitive, his army destroyed, his power undone. Exhausted and desperate, Sisera searched for a place to hide. That's when he spotted the camp of the Canaanites. The Canaanites were a nomadic people who maintained peaceful relations with both the Israelites and the Canaanites. Sisera knew there was peace between Jabin, the king of Hazor, and the house of Heber the Kenite. In his mind, this meant he could find safe refuge among them. Approaching the camp, Sisera saw a tent belonging to Jael, Heber's wife. At that time it was customary for women to have their own tents, separate from their husbands. Seeing Jael outside her tent, Sisera approached her, hoping to find shelter. Jael, seeing the Canaanite commander approaching, went out to meet him. She recognized him immediately and, realizing his desperate condition, saw an opportunity. Jael invited Sisera into her tent, offering him protection and rest. Grateful for the offer of refuge, Sisera entered Jael's tent. He was exhausted from the battle and the subsequent flight, and the promise of a safe hiding place was irresistible. Trusting in the alliance between his king and the Canaanites, Sisera let his guard down. Once inside the tent, Sisera asked for water to drink, as he was thirsty from his escape. Jael, however, went beyond his request. Instead of water, she offered Sisera milk from a skin. This additional act of kindness likely served to put Sisera even more at ease, convincing him that he was indeed safe. After drinking the milk, Sisera, feeling more secure and succumbing to exhaustion, asked Jael to stand at the entrance of the tent. He instructed her to deny his presence if anyone asked. Confident in his safety, Sisera then lay down to rest, quickly falling into a deep sleep. It was at this moment that Jael made a decision that would change the course of history. While Sisera slept, she took a tent peg and a hammer. Silently, she approached the sleeping general. With one powerful and precise blow, Jael drove the peg through Sisera's temple, piercing his head and fastening it to the ground. Jael's act was swift and decisive. Sisera, caught completely off guard in his sleep, died instantly. The powerful general who had once terrorized Israel for 2 decades met his end at the hands of a woman in a tent in the wilderness. Jael's choice to kill Sisera was an act of great boldness and risk. She was aware of the consequences she could face if her action were discovered by Sisera's allies. However, Jael chose to align herself with the people of Israel, playing a crucial role in their deliverance. Meanwhile, Barak continued his pursuit of Sisera. Following the trail of the fugitive general, he eventually arrived at the Canaanite camp. As he approached, Barak was met by Jael, who came out of her tent to greet him. Jael called out to Barak and said, "Come, and I will show you the man you are looking for." Intrigued and perhaps a bit apprehensive, Barak followed Jael into her tent. Inside, he encountered a shocking scene. Sisera lay dead on the ground, with the peg still driven into his temple. The sight of Sisera's lifeless body must have been a moment of triumph and relief for Barak. The man who had oppressed Israel for so long, the commander of the army that once seemed invincible, now lay defeated. And, surprisingly, His defeat had not come at the hands of a mighty warrior, but a courageous woman. This moment marked the fulfillment of Deborah's prophecy. Before the battle, when Barak hesitated to lead the army without Deborah's presence, she had declared that the honor of victory would go to a woman. Now this prediction was fulfilled in an unexpected way through Jael's actions. Sisera's death at Jael's hands was the final blow in the defeat of the Canaanites. With their powerful general dead, their army destroyed, and their iron chariots lost, Canaanite domination over Israel was effectively over. Following the decisive victory over the Canaanites and Sisera's death, Deborah and Barak sang a song of triumph. This song, recorded in Judges chapter 5, is one of the oldest pieces of Hebrew poetry and offers a unique perspective on the events that had just occurred. The song begins with a call to celebrate. Deborah and Barak summon the people to praise the Lord for the great deliverance he provided. They acknowledge that it was God who gave victory to Israel, defeating their enemies and breaking the yoke of oppression. In the opening of the song, Deborah presents herself as a mother in Israel, a title that reflects her leadership and care for the people. She calls on kings and princes to hear her song, elevating the significance of the event she is about to narrate. The song then steps back in time, describing Israel's condition before the battle. It portrays a country in crisis, with deserted roads due to travelers' fear of being attacked. Villages were abandoned, and normal life had ceased until Deborah rose as a leader. Deborah and Barak recall how the people of Israel had chosen new gods, resulting in war at their gates. They note that among 40,000 in Israel, not a shield or spear could be seen, highlighting the disarmed and vulnerable state of the people before the battle. The song then goes on to praise the tribes that responded to the call for battle. Ephraim, Benjamin, Manasseh, Zebulun, and Issachar are honored for sending their warriors. The leaders of these tribes are praised for their courage and willingness to risk their lives for the cause of Israel. At the same time, the song harshly criticizes the tribes that chose not to participate in the battle. Reuben, Gilead, Gad, Dan, and Asher are rebuked for staying home, tending to their own affairs while their brothers fought. The narrative then turns to the battle itself. It describes how the kings of Canaan came to fight, but took no plunder of silver. This is a reference to their total defeat, where they not only gained nothing, but lost everything. One of the most intriguing verses in the song declares, "From the heavens the stars fought. From their courses they fought against Sisera." This poetic language suggests cosmic intervention in the battle, possibly referring to natural phenomena that aided Israel's victory. The song then mentions the Kishon River, calling it an ancient river and describing how it swept away the enemies. This supports the earlier narrative that natural conditions, possibly a sudden flood, played a crucial role in the defeat of the Canaanites. Jael, the woman who killed Sisera, receives special praise in the song. She is called most blessed of women for her courageous act. The song vividly details how Jael killed Sisera, emphasizing the irony of a mighty warrior being defeated by a woman in her tent. There is then a poignant scene imagining Sisera's mother anxiously waiting for her son's return. The song describes her looking through the window, wondering why Sisera's chariot is so delayed. Her ladies-in-waiting try to console her, suggesting that they are merely delayed because they are dividing the spoils of battle. This scene serves to contrast the Canaanites' expectation of victory with their actual defeat. The song concludes with a powerful prayer. "So may all your enemies perish, O Lord, but may those who love you be like the sun when it rises in its strength." This final verse summarizes the central theme of the song, the Lord's victory over his enemies and the exaltation of those who follow him. After the song, the biblical text notes that the land had peace for 40 years. This period of peace was a direct result of the victory over the Canaanites and Deborah's leadership. The Song of Deborah and Barak serves several important functions in the narrative. First, it offers a poetic recap of the battle events, preserving the memory of this crucial moment in Israel's history. Second, the song provides additional details that are not present in the prose narrative. For example, it gives a clearer picture of which tribes participated in the battle and which did not, something not mentioned earlier. Third, the song serves as a theological interpretation of the events. It repeatedly emphasizes that the victory came from the Lord, not merely from Israel's military strength. This reinforces the central idea of the Book of Judges, that when Israel is faithful to God, He grants them victory over their enemies. Fourth, the song acts as a public celebration of the victory. It not only recounts the events, but invites the people to rejoice and praise God for His deliverance. This would help solidify the memory of these events in Israel's national consciousness. Finally, the song serves as a reminder for future generations. By being preserved and likely sung repeatedly over the years, it would keep alive the memory of this great deliverance, inspiring future generations to trust in God during times of hardship. The Song of Deborah and Barak is notable not only for its content, but also for its form. It is considered one of the oldest examples of Hebrew poetry we have, and its vivid language and powerful imagery make it an impressive literary piece. The structure of the song, alternating between narrative, praise, and even an imagined scene from the enemy's camp, demonstrates considerable literary sophistication. This suggests that even in this early period of Israel's history, there was already a rich tradition of poetic composition. During this time, Deborah continued to serve as a judge in Israel. Her wisdom and discernment, which had been crucial during the time of crisis, were now equally valuable in maintaining peace and resolving internal disputes. Deborah's impact as a judge, prophetess, and military leader was profound and lasting. She stood out as a rare example of female leadership in a time and culture dominated by men. Her story served as a powerful reminder that God can use anyone, regardless of gender or social status, to accomplish His purposes. Deborah's success as a leader also set an important precedent in Israel. She demonstrated that effective leadership comes not from physical strength or military power, but from wisdom, faith, and the ability to inspire and unite the people. This model of leadership would influence future leaders in Israel, including kings and prophets. The period of peace that followed Deborah's victory allowed Israel to strengthen as a nation. Without the constant threat of invasion, the people could focus on agriculture, trade, and the development of their communities. This time of prosperity and security was a testament to God's blessing on the nation when they followed Him faithfully. However, as the Book of Judges repeatedly shows, this peace would not last forever. Eventually, a new generation would arise that did not know the Lord or the works He had done for Israel. The cycle of apostasy, oppression, and deliverance would begin again. Despite this, Deborah's legacy endured. Her story continued to be told, her song continued to be sung, and her example of faithful leadership continued to inspire. She became an iconic figure in Israel's history, a woman who rose up in a time of crisis and through her faith and courage changed the course of her nation's history. Deborah's story teaches us several important lessons. It shows us that God often chooses unexpected leaders to accomplish His purposes. It reminds us that true strength comes from faith and obedience to God, not from military or political power. And it encourages us to rise up and act with courage when faced with challenges, trusting that God will be with us. May we, like Deborah, have the courage to stand in the face of adversity, the wisdom to lead with justice, and the faith to trust that God is at work even in the most difficult circumstances. If you were inspired by this story and would like to continue exploring the rich narratives of the Bible, Don't forget to subscribe to our channel